So good morning or good afternoon. My name is Colin Willcock. I'm chairman of the board of the 5G Infrastructure Association, and I want to talk to you about Smart Networks and Services Partnership Proposal, the way of trying to gain leadership for Europe in 6G. So just to talk about myself and where I'm coming from, I'm representing, as I said, the 5G Infrastructure Association. This is an association that tries to be the voice of European industry on all things 5G. And when we talk about industry, we don't just mean the big players, Nokia and Ericsson and Orange. We also mean the SMEs, but also the academics and the research institutes. So the association has the whole ecosystem from Europe trying to bring 5G forward. And as we will see in the future, trying to bring 6G forward. So let's first start with the current research activities that the association are doing in 5G. So this is part of the so-called 5G PPP partnership. This is a public-private partnership. The public side is the European Commission, and the private side is the 5G Infrastructure Association. And what we've done over the last 7 years or so is we've tried to develop a lot of the key concepts we currently think of as 5G. So in the first phase from 2014 to roughly 2017, a lot of the fundamental concepts were developed. So there was a lot of projects that had developed some of the key ideas of 5G and got a consensus of what 5G should be. And from these projects, there have been hundreds of contributions to standardization. And as we all know, in 3GPP is where the 5G standard has been defined, and we have been contributing hundreds of contributions there. In the second phase, what we've tried to do is then bring this 5G technology to the vertical industries, to the industries beyond telecoms, the automotive, the smart health, smart cities, Industry 4.0. And we've been working together in projects with these key vertical players, trying to show that 5G technology works for them and trying to convince them to invest in this technology. And then in the last phase, phase 3, we've been building innovation platforms. So 5G platforms, typically across countries, which have allowed new players and new organizations to try out new innovative ideas on top of 5G platforms. So that's the existing program. And that existing program has launched many projects, so over 60 projects. It has had 800 plus contributions to standardization, 1,300 scientific publications. But more important than that, it's been the place where the consensus of what 5G is or will be has been created. Super. So that's what we have been doing. Now let's look to the future. And maybe the key point to make is that 2020, or indeed 5G, is not the end of the story. So 5G is still very much at the beginning of its history. So it's not the case that 5G is over. That's the last message I would like to give. So 5G still has many years of development. However, at some point, be that 2030 or further down the road, we will need a new technology. And that new technology, that new generation, will be 6G. And if we're going to have that available in 2030 to deploy, we now need to start with the fundamental research. What we did in 5G PPP for 5G, developing the cornerstones in terms of technology, we now need to start doing in 6G. And that is what Smart Networks and Services is about. Smart Networks and Services is a new European partnership to develop the fundamental technologies of 6G. Why does this make sense? Well, it makes sense because we know that mobile communication networks are becoming ever more important. You just need to look around you, and unfortunately in the tragic COVID times that many of us are living, you can see that mobile communication or digital communications are becoming ever more important. But the issue is also that these digital infrastructures are now underpinning a lot of our key industry. So we've got the so-called digital transformation, where more and more industries are using these digital infrastructures to actually tie their businesses together. And this seems to be only increasing with time. Therefore, these mobile communications networks are going beyond just a luxury to becoming the underpinning differentiator for modern industry. And this means that if we don't have access to that new technology, if we cannot develop that new technology, then we cannot be competitive on the world stage. So Europe feels it needs to be part of this technology development. It has reacted early to create this proposal, to try and make sure that we can, from an early stage, develop the fundamental technologies for 6G. So where does this proposal come from? I've mentioned my own organization. 5GIA has been instrumental in creating that new proposal, and indeed instrumental in creating the 5G PPP that's now running. But that's by no means the end of the story. And the issue here is that smart networks and services has a much broader scope than the current 5G program. And the reason is that 6G, we believe, will be a time of bringing a lot of the digital technologies together. And that means we can no longer consider in isolation things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, IoT, cloud. These are no longer completely separate domains. These are also embedded in that telecom infrastructure, in that telecom network. So we need to work together in smart networks and services to develop this new technology, this 6G. And that means that the proposal was not just coming from my own association, but a number of different associations. So Networld 2020, AIOTI from NESI, and these different organizations represented something like 1,000 companies or individual organizations from industry, SMEs, and the research community. So a large body of European industry thinks it's vital to invest early in 6G research. We have come together and we created that proposal. Why do we need it? What are we trying to achieve? Well, I've mentioned the digital industry digitization. Clearly, this is one of the key things. We see the need to have competitive industries in Europe, and to enable that, we need access to this technology. We clearly wish to generate or enhance the research and development of such systems in Europe. We wish to try and bring these new technologies, the AI, the machine learning, the cloud, we wish to bring that into the mobile networks domain, into the system. And we also wish to try and create or generate a global market using European technology. And clearly, there's also the societal and political aspect. So the wish to develop a technology in 6G that meets the values of Europe. Now that might sound a little bit strange, but there are some unique ideas or values in Europe. For example, personal data. In many parts of the world, there doesn't seem to be any concern about protection of personal data. We see some of the things going on with some of the internet companies where there's clearly misuse of company data and horrible scandals. We can see that Europe is much more sensitive about these sort of things. We see GDPR, this new standard or new rules for how to handle personal data. And that's just an example of the sort of things we would like to see encompassed in 6G and new technologies, the ability to actually protect personal data, the idea of security, the idea of trustfulness, these sort of ideas we would like to embed into that technology, together with some of the key things of our age, which are things like energy efficiency, to make sure that we can actually afford to deploy this technology once we've developed it. So in terms of general objectives, so within this partnership, we talked about having research and innovation for 6G networks. We talked about full digitization of European society, but note When we talk about European society, we're not just talking about the industries. I've talked a lot about the automotive and the Industry 4.0, but it's more than that. It's also about society. It's about tackling societal problems. We all know that we have an aging population, certainly in Europe. We have an increased movement of people to the urban centres. We have increased problems with resources, with water, with electricity, with traffic, with rubbish, with electricity generation, with renewable energy resources. Somehow we need some common digital infrastructure that we can actually tackle some of these societal problems, not just about making money, but about making people's lives better. And that is the hope, to start with 5G and then continue with 6G. I've talked about then safeguarding European values in terms of security and privacy, and indeed this sovereignty idea, this idea of trying to make sure that we have access to the key technologies within Europe. So that's the objectives, and that's all well and fine, but really I can't introduce a project about, or a program about 6G without talking about what is 6G to some time. So let me show you one slide just to give a flavor, just an idea of what 6G might be. So all I've tried to do is on the left-hand side, I've tried to indicate some of the key digital technologies that will come into 6G. So things that we need to embed or take account of in 6G technology. And you can see the sort of things you would expect in terms of artificial intelligence, but also things like big data and terahertz. And by going to terahertz and talking about sensing, we have the ability to look at the world in a way where the network doesn't just allow communication, it also allows sensing, the ability to know where things are. And this means 6G can be a key enabler to tie our digital world with our physical world. And that's what's so exciting. In the middle, we have the key areas to be looking at, the virtualization, the IoT, the things we need to solve. And you'll notice we then have the two key aspects that we must always keep in mind, this energy efficiency and this security. And then we have what we're trying to actually achieve on the right-hand side. So the digital transformation, the smart mobility, the smart cities. If you'd like to know more, then you can see from this slide the link on the internet where the actual proposal for this partnership can be found. And you can read more about exactly what we're trying to do in terms of objectives, in terms of time plan, in terms of the technologies we're trying to do. And also on the same website is the strategic research and innovation agenda, where we map out the roadmap of technological developments we see over the next 5 to 8 years. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time and hope that's been of interest to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Boswarthicket. I work for ETSI, the European Telecom Standards Institute, and today I'm going to give you a perspective from ETSI on research into standards, how ETSI interacts with research and innovation communities. So first of all, a little bit about ETSI. Hopefully many of you know who ETSI is. ETSI is a standards organization based in France and Europe. We are an SDO, a standards development organization, and also an ESO, meaning that we're recognized by the European Union to support EU regulation. We've been in existence for over 30 years, and we are, of course, one of the founding members of 1M2M, who you should know quite well, and also 3GPP, who are famed for working from GSM to 3G to 4G to 5G. We have, of this day, over 900 members. I think we're around the 930 member mark from over 65 countries. So although we're based in Europe, we have a very global spread as we reach over 5 a year. What I'd like to focus on today really is the research and innovation perspective. So it's interesting to know, out of our 900 plus members, we have 120 plus members who are directly related to research and education. So we have public and private research bodies, universities, who are members of ETSI and actually contribute to our work program. So you see that over 13% of our research community are members. And indeed, they don't only participate to the standards, they're very active in driving the standards. So 12% of those researchers are actually chairmen of working groups, of groups, rapporteurs of specifications. And the spread of those researchers in ETSI, they come from over 31 different nationalities. So it's a very vibrant and diverse community of researchers in ETSI. Just looking a little bit inside the structure of ETSI, in the heart of our strategy, we have this adage to be at the heart of digital, so really to be designing tomorrow's world. And to do this, we cover many technical areas, including mobile. So let's say at the moment, we're working on 5G, and then things such as IoT and M2M, which are done in ETSI specification groups, such as Smart M2M, but also in partnership projects such as One M2M. We're very strong on cybersecurity and also cover innovative technologies such as NFV, network virtualization, edge, network automation, artificial intelligence, blockchain and distributed ledgers, quantum, key and computer networking, and also we're very active in the area of augmented reality, virtual reality. Our structure is broken down into three main areas: partnership projects, so 3GPP and 1M2M, technical committees, which you can see in the center of the slide, working on things such as e-health, environmental engineering, core network, mobile standards, methodology for testing in those technical committees. And then on the right of the slide, you can see something called industry specification groups, which are smaller, typically smaller, more focused and dynamic groups where we can set these up very quickly to look at very innovative technology areas. And this is often used to work with output from research projects, but not only. So looking at these ISGs, which I think are of particular interest here, you can see we have a good selection of ISGs on the right. They really are a very useful tool for developing early standards works, maybe even pre-standards works, resulting from research. So when researchers are ready to bring their research output towards standards, we can welcome them in an ISG, Industry Specifications Group, help them understand how standards can bring value to their project, help build the community, and then help them move their ideas to the marketplace. So here you can see it's relatively simple. You only need to have 4 ETSI member companies who wish to join with you in an idea and meeting some essential requirements for ISGs in ETSI, and then you can start up. So you bring the idea to ETSI, you build a community of 4 or more ETSI members, you propose that to the ETSI Director General and the ETSI Board, and normally very quickly, we can set up an innovative standards group in ETSI to help with researchers' needs. And this is interesting because differently to technical committees and partnership projects, in ETSI, the ISGs are open to ETSI members and also non-members. So it's very useful for people who don't yet want to get fully involved in standardization, but just want to get involved in some standardization by joining as a non-member participant to these ISGs. And this has been used for several successful standards, including millimeter wave, network virtualization, edge, AI, extended reality, and quantum technologies. And that's just to name a few as an example. So if we look at an example of where this has worked, we can see some key, let's call them building blocks for 5G. Obviously 3GPP is currently working on 5G, and ETSI ISGs have done some of the work on developing early technologies to make them ready to be adopted in 3GPP. So we can see 5G is a very good example of a system which assembles many different technologies and capabilities. On the radio side, you can look at millimeter wave, massive MIMO, beam forming. In the network core, you can look at network slicing, pushing out towards the edge compute, the cloudification of the hardware into software, and also the beginning of a zero-touch concept for the network. Also down at the lower layers, you can see there's work on TCP/IP evolutions and optical, passive optical networks. And these are just a few examples of technologies. And many of these have been, let's say, incubated in ETSI ISGs, so millimeter wave, edge compute, NFV and OSM, OSM being one of ETSI's early open source groups, which is working very well hand in hand with NFV and other virtualization groups, and also groups such as ZSM, ENI, and SAI, looking at the use of AI and machine learning to manage networks and to secure networks, to move towards this concept of zero touch and zero maintenance networking. So I think it's interesting to call out how ETSI is working for and with research and innovation. So ETSI encourages the constant flow of research, innovation and ideas into ETSI because that really feeds our work program. Our work program needs innovative new ideas to ensure that it remains relevant and interesting to our members. We've made this a priority, and it's even stated at the board level, at the strategy level, where we state clearly ETSI works at the forefront of emerging technology and has and forges very close relationships with researchers and innovators. This is supported by the ETSI board, who actually set up a group looking specifically at research and standardization. And it's also, we have recently just released a long-term technical roadmap, which is a deep study on the latest technical trends which are happening now and probably for the next 2 or 3 years, which will help us understand where our members may wish to bring standards into ETSI. So those elements are very interesting for innovation, researchers and standards. In addition, the Director General of ETSI created a brand new department inside the Secretariat in the support team called New and Emerging Technologies. And the principal roles of this department are to optimize the relations towards researchers and innovations, starting in Europe, but also not limited to Europe, looking beyond Europe and globally. Looking at the evolution of new technology trends that may be coming out, sometimes destructive technology trends and even business trends, which will have an impact and an influence on our standards program, and just keeping a radar on where that's going so we can evolve our work program with that in cooperation with our members. And then working with our existing members and new members who want to come to ETSI to set up new technical committees, new ISGs, new working groups to help them understand how that can be done. So I've added in this little concept to the right of the slide. You can see the sort of flow, and it's a circle, it's a cycle, from an idea through research, through standards to marketplace, and then back again, because obviously that's an evolution cycle, which is tested throughout that cycle. I'd just like to give the audience some of the tools we put in place in ETSI very recently to help researchers. This is, let's say this is 1 year old, these new tools. And we've put a dedicated website, so anybody who works in innovation, in research, in Europe, outside of Europe, can go to etsi.org/research, and all of the help and information you need is there. Inside you will find let's say three principal things which help. There is a landscaping of the European research related entities, so the different elements in Europe, the different platforms, the different funding organizations, which is very useful to understand because it is quite complex and it is of course evolving. Also, we've done a mapping between the Networld 2020 Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, which is a very, very technically oriented analysis of where research will be working in the next 2, 5, 7 years, so very technical. And what we have done is map those technical research areas to corresponding work areas in ETSI, so technical groups. And that's useful if somebody wants to know how to map research into standards. They can click on those areas such as optical networks, satellite communications, and then find which technical bodies in ETSI are working on those areas and can help them. And also very simply, there's a very basic 8-point plan for researchers, which is how to advise researchers when they're putting together projects, maybe for the European Commission to have funding or others. It's how to get involved with standardization early. So there's 8 tips and tricks, let's say, on that 8-point plan. The moment is 5G. And researchers are already talking about 6G. So there are many 6G initiatives being announced around the globe, from Korea to Japan, China, USA, even in Finland, in Europe. There have been announcements about 6G platforms. Europe has announced that it has a very clear ambition to become a leader in 6G technologies and technology research. And to do that, we need to coordinate and boost the innovation and supply ecosystem, whilst supporting inclusiveness and global cooperation. So obviously Europe isn't looking at doing it alone, it wants to do it with global partners. It will have been said in other speeches, but there will be a new European Smart Network Services joint undertaking beginning next year, 2021, and ETSI plans to be inside that group as a key standards partner, able to advise them on the researchers on how to get involved in standardization and the value of standardization. Other groups such as 5G IA and Networld 2020 are looking at research agendas and roadmaps for beyond 5G and 6G, and ETSI is working with both of those important platforms as we move forward. But it's very important to remember that 3GPP is currently defining 5G, so with the focus in the marketplace is 5G standards, 5G deployments and 5G services. But we do know that probably around post-2028, 3GPP will be looking at 6G. So we have probably another 8 to 10 years before 3GPP picks up this area and moves forward. We still have a lot of value to promote out of 5G. However, the differences between 5G, beyond 5G and 6G are not really fully known, as there's no clear dividing line, no decision between when 5G will end, when beyond 5G will begin, when something called 6G will be seen in 3GPP or ITU-T. And we don't even know precisely what 6G could contain. There's a few candidate technologies, but if we just always go for, let's say, a race for better technology, faster, quicker, more bandwidth, maybe that's not the only way. Some of the initial thinkings on 6G is that we need a more fundamental change, focusing less on the network and performance and more on the capabilities of the service, such as full global coverage to ensure that everybody can get accessibility to ICT services, system autonomy to make sure that the network actually runs on its own with very little maintenance, increased sustainability so it's more energy efficient and less destructive on planetary resources. And also, very important as we move towards critical services over 5G and 6G, is that we can design security and trust upfront. So the concept of security by design. So to conclude, some key points, really, it is essential when we want to bridge between standards and research projects, that we have early interactions between standards experts and research experts to talk about what their needs are and what needs to be done. It's the early interactions which are really key. Education by standards bodies such as ETSI about how they work and the current content of their work programs is very important towards researchers, but also towards students, undergraduates, postgraduates, because they are the individuals who will become the researchers and the engineers of tomorrow. So it's important to educate those about the value of standardization. Also, standards bodies need to communicate on the value of standardization. Obviously, it's an investment of time and effort, but what is the value of that standardization element when it comes to research? And very importantly, coordination to avoid fragmentation and duplication of effort. So coordination between policymakers such as governments, the European commissions and others, research bodies, the industry, the ICT industry, and also standardization bodies in order to foster a global and open approach to innovation. So with that, I will conclude. I'll leave you with this final slide, which is just a set of links to the ETSI help desk. So if researchers want to get any information on standards in ETSI, basically contact the help desk at research@etsi.org, where we will have lots of advice for you. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.